2023, the world had 7 million kilometers of transmission lines. That's what the world has. These were to serve the 8 billion people in the world. Again, somebody did some sample study and found out that for some sample countries, for every 16 kilometers of distribution lines, you have a kilometer of transmission lines. So just did some simple mathematics to be able to assist us know where we are and what we need to do to be an average country. So I did the 7 million circuit kilometers for 8 billion people. We have 54 million people in the world, in Kenya. So Kenya, to be an average country in the world, requires for us to be close to 44,000 kilometers of lines. I know later I'll mention that we are, as a country, we are just above 9,000 kilometers. We are more than our neighboring countries, but you can actually see what is to be done. Distribution system, KPLC has approximately 320,000 kilometers. You can see actually the annual reports. So again, if we are to be an average country having 1 to 16, we should be having close to 20,000 kilometers. So this is just to tell you there's, even to be an average community or a country, we still have a long way to go because the transmission lines we have are almost 50% of even to serve the distribution network. That's why you have areas that have, yes, distribution lines, but the transmission line has constraints, and that's what we're trying to run with time to catch up what should have been done many years ago. I realized that I might be having some friends who might be coming from organizations and they're not quite clear about how we get power. Power starts from a point beyond the switch where you have. So it's usually generated. Kenya, we have Kengen, our sister utility company, generating most of the power, but we have other players. We have more than 20 IPPs and other players who generate power. That power is generated at a low voltage. We have to step up the voltage. Then from what is number 2 in this cartoon, I just picked from the internet, nothing unique. From 2 to 4, I would say that is what we have as transmission. So we step up the power, transmit over a certain distance, then we step down. Then when you step down, typically you step down to either 66 or 33 or 11 in Garissa's case. Then the power is distributed by our sister company, Kenya Power. It's retailed. Then also RERE plays a key role. So we have a number of players that play that role. That's what I'm stressed. You'll be hearing terminologies. Again, those ones who are new in energy sector. Megawatts, so you'll be seeing a lot of MW on my screen. And you'll be seeing a lot of kilovolts. Megawatts, a good example about a watt. I'm sure all of you buy a bulb in your house or you buy a TV. So if you look at, there's a wattage, so it has a capacity. Again, at generation level, there's always the capacity of the power plant. So that's wattage, kilowatt, megawatt, you can see the list. Kilovolts, volts are a bit complicated to understand, especially for us who are not electrical engineers. And maybe a simple way that I have is equivalent of pressure in a water pipe is equivalent of voltage in an electricity system. So I'm just using an analogy, it's not 1:1. So you can imagine that if you want to bring water from Murang'a to Nairobi, you can imagine the pipe has to be big and it has to have high pressure. You can just imagine, just to give you a mental picture, what is happening with electricity. So if you want power to go a long distance, we need to have a big pipe and we have to have high pressure. So that's kilovolts. So you see most of our big lines that are going long distances are going to be a higher voltage. By the time it gets to Kenya Power, they have to step down again. If the water from Ndakaini was to go to your house, I'm sure that pressure it can bring your house down. So it has to be stepped down to a level that can come in your 1 inch or 1.5 inch pipe to your house. So that's what more or less happens. The other thing to mention with electricity is a bit unique from other sector players, other infrastructure, whether it's roads and water. Electricity is very strange that you always have to balance supply and demand. That's one thing that has to be managed. So you cannot have, and this is what the National Control Center is going to do, you cannot have 10,000 megawatts being generated and people spending 2 megawatts. The system will collapse. So somebody always tries to balance the two, supply and demand. So we have frequency, and if it goes off plus or minus certain range, then you have a national blackout. I just want to start with those two terms. So if you hear them, whether megawatts, KVs, frequency, you'll have actually known what it's all about. Just small class. But back to my presentation, and I keep on repeating this one here because I have it. It has been mentioned, but a different way. And I just want to remind us as Kenyans is that those who do not learn history are doomed to repeat it. So if you don't learn, we're doomed to repeat it. And those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. So it's very important that we first know the past to be able to know the future where we're going to go. And we have to make sure that what happened in the past does not happen in the current situation. In 1954, the British built Owen Falls Dam in Jinja, approximately 150 megawatts, and therefore, apart from being consumed that area, from mid-1950s, 132 kV line was made all the way from Jinja to Juja, later extended to Rabai. So that was first the primary transmission line in the country to allow almost 80 megawatts to flow down the country, or whatever it was at that time. So the first lines came on board, less than 1,000 kilometers. So you have to jump from the 50s, you enter late 60s, when hydropower station was done along the Seven Forks. That was Mzee Jomo Kenyatta's time. So you have a couple of them, Kiambere, Kamburu, and the rest came. But most of them came all the way to 1990. So you had a number of hydros being done, and therefore transmission lines were being done to Nairobi, to Mombasa, to Nyanyuki. So the grid has been added 1,600. So I just wanted to just see the gap from the 50s, you jump to the 60s, you have those kind of numbers. You're going to have to jump to 1981 when Takwel was done to produce 106 megawatts, and therefore a transmission line was done. Also, Olkaria geothermal power plants were extended, and a new line that comes to Nairobi North was commissioned around 2008. Then we have extensions going to Eldoret, Webuye, Bamburi, Kilifi, Chemos Seat, connecting the grid. So I just want to show you that over time, we were doing projects, but they were coming after a number of years, and yet the population was increasing. So by the time we got to 2008, the country had 3,400 kilometers of circuit kilometers of transmission line, serving a population that time of approximately 38 million. The peak demand in that financial year was just above 1,000 megawatts. So we had a very simple grid running just like the railway station line from Mombasa, Nairobi to Malaba or Kisumu area. Then you had the hydros that came. You had a line going to Mombasa or Rabai. Then you had lines coming to Nairobi. You had lines going to Nyanyuki. Then Takwel had come on board. Then later Sound will come on board. So we had a very simple grid, extremely simple grid to support people at that time. The government has started making a number of decisions with also development partners to open up the space. So again, the part of the left side, in 1987, an act was enacted, and this introduced the IPPs. So we've been having IPPs from that time. So again, the generation that bundled, so KenGen was formed, plus IPPs came on board. The regulator also brought on board. So those are some of the changes. But by the time it was coming 10 years later, the government and development partners and everybody else in the industries realized that, yes, we have plans for generation, but we had constraints in the grid. And that's why by 2006, the government enacted a new Energy Act and created KETRACO and GDC. So KETRACO was formed, and KETRACO does nothing from morning to evening, Monday to Friday, January to December. We do nothing else except high voltage lines. These are from 132 kV and above. So we thought this is an area for us to fast track and catch up with the generation. We need to have, and catch up also with the demand of the nation. We need to have a specific company that focuses on nothing else than transmission. Then we had GDC also formed the same time with KETRACO, we're the same age. They were focused in terms of accelerating geothermal potential so that they take the risks, drilling, because Kenya had decided that our foundation of generation was going to be geothermal. The sector kind of looks at this. So you have a ministry that is in charge of giving policy direction and leadership. You have EPRA. I think all of you are familiar with EPRA playing a key role in terms of regulations. Then the Energy and Petroleum Tribunal. Then generation, you have a key number of players. The same mentioned KenGen. We have GDC that specializes in the area. We have IPP, so we have quite a number of independent power producers doing all sorts of generation. Then we have NUPEA, who are neighbors here, focus in terms of long-term, in terms of the country realizing that a time is coming where we have to go beyond the traditional generation that we have, and that's what they're looking into. Then we have transmission, KETRACO focus on that, although still play a key role with Kenya Power in that area. But with the distribution network, Kenya Power playing a key role, and REREC, also our neighbors here, playing a key role, especially reaching out to extend the grid in rural areas. So that's the kind of setup we have with the grid, working as a family to ensure the grid expands and it's in a way that is sustainable. Our vision is fairly simple: to provide stable power grid that will transform lives in the region and beyond. So we see ourselves not just building transmission lines or substations, but transforming lives. Our mission, as mentioned earlier, is to provide stable electricity grid. So that's a key thing, that people require stable grid. And the second thing is to facilitate power trade for sustainable social development, economic development. So one of the things especially that is coming very, very soon will be the power trade. Maybe at a different section we'll talk about. So we have trade that allows various countries to sell power to our neighboring countries or vice versa. So right now, most of you know that we have a line from Ethiopia that is transmission power to Kenya. Later, very soon, will be, hopefully next month, will be energizing the line to Tanzania to allow also power to be sold to Tanzania. We've been doing many years with Uganda, so that is happening. Most of you might have also seen the regulations where there's going, even within Kenya, we are going to have open access and or market operations where they'll also allow other players to come on board as supply retailers and buy power. So KETRACO's system, and also allow consumers to buy power directly from generators. So KETRACO's role will also be support that within the country and within the borders. We are a company, yes, but only owned by the National Treasury and one share with the Ministry of Energy. That's how we are. We have our mandate. Waziri mentioned it, so I'll not read it. So it's everything from planning to operating and maintaining the system. So we do everything from that. So we are responsible for ensuring where we know where a country is and where the country is going in future. Specific areas that we focus on is to provide access to power to existing. In the last 4 months or 3 months, we have had, I think, 4 or 5 peak increases. So we've been clocking demand increasing day by day. We have a generation capacity of 3,238. But remember, all these power plants have a capacity factor. So, for example, solar, which is available during the daytime, is not available at night. So it's, although the figure written here is 100 or 200 megawatts, but the figure keeps on changing, depending on where the sun is. Then there's importation from Uganda, approximately 50. Then Ethiopia, we import close to 200 megawatts during the daytime. So that's what we're doing. For those who are not familiar with the energy mix, this I just want to show that 93% of power in Kenya is green, and hopefully this also attract more industries that are becoming more environmental conscious to come and move to a place like Kenya. Since inception to date, KETRACO has been relying on National Treasury borrowing, concession loans, then National Treasury on granting this money to KETRACO. So that's what we have been operating, but we are thinking of other financing. But I would also to mention that we have projects that are about to start financed by this financial. So they already have many projects that we are currently having. One of them is Marekado Okundo. Most of you have been reading about the special economic zone in that area. So we have a JECA project. We hope to finish the bidding in early January. Narok Bomet, financed by African Development Bank and the Koreans. We hope to start break ground very soon. We already have a contractor. Malindi Weru, again, is bidding stage. Cabinet Rumuruti, AFD bidding stage. PS talked about STATCOMs. STATCOMs are electrical equipments that help us manage the voltage in the system. We normally, our grid, yes, is robust, but it's still not strong enough. So when we have voltage fluctuation at the grid level, we're bound to affect quite a lot. Then we have Kimuka, we put our 400 kV by World Bank. We plan to start, once we close, one or two things, Longalani, Masabit, Isiolo, to allow Masabit first to be connected to the national grid, but secondly, to allow Longalani line power that is evacuated to have two routes. One is directly to Suswa or through Masabit to Isiolo. Those who have been to Masabit, you also know that area has rich potential for wind generation. So just being able to open the country for more generation. Then we have Makindo substation, just to be able to ensure the corridor from Nairobi to Mombasa, the existing 132 kV is strengthened in between. Another key project that is coming in the system is what we call the National System Control Center. The current one we have, yes, has been refurbished and continues to be improved, but was done in 1988. And it's time that Kenya, especially at this time when we are putting more variable renewable energy like solar and wind and growing, that we have a modern national control center. So we have one that financed by the French AFD and the French Treasury. So we're at the tail end of having a contract approved very soon so that to come on board. In summary, is what I've written there, KETRACO needs $250 million per year for the next 20 years. That's the kind of money we'll need to be able to ensure first we give you a grid that has grown. Will not reach the numbers, but at least will be growing. You can actually see there's a lot of money that is needed by KETRACO. I mentioned this earlier. Investment is costly and capital intensive. And so far we have been dependent on government to borrow, but as both PS and CS said, there's competing needs, because whether it's in irrigation, whether it's in hospitals, clinics, schools, the government has competing needs, social needs to meet. So, and this has continued looming financial pressure on the exchequer, because exchequer still has also borrowed with the financials, and we still have new projects, so there's a very serious potential challenge. One of the things to mention, to be clear, because I know it may be later becoming a question, but I decided to answer it. The model we've been using, yes, is by DFI's government borrowing. Most of the projects that we had that I've been reading, if you look at the date the loan was taken, was typically 2017 and behind. So that's what you've been doing financing. This time we are getting new projects to be financed by World Bank. So we estimate a cycle of 5 to 8 years to move everything from concept note to project closure to new projects. So since we're about to start with World Bank, AFD, and the other financials, this even conservative estimate is that the earliest government can, even if it has the space to be able to borrow from World Bank and the rest, is close to 2018, 2028, 2029. So that becomes a big challenge. So another thing that challenge that KETRACO has is that Cabinet met some time ago, and one of the things that they wanted is to reduce the losses. So the number of targets that have been given to reduce almost from 22 to 14, with 5 going to commercial losses, 8 on technical. But for me as KETRACO is the 1% reduction in losses. So I have a target in terms of to reduce losses, and that requires infrastructure to be put on board to reduce losses. So that's one of the things we're trying to do. We cannot do that without bringing up more infrastructure. Another issue that KETRACO has to build transmission lines to help us harness our potential for geothermal. So as geothermal goes along the Rift Valley, we have transmission lines. Kenya has a very good wind potential. We need to improve reliability, so the power that is already getting to you has to be reliable. We have to help this country harness the green energy potential that it has. Then you have to reduce losses. So there are now a number of things that we need to get done. And that's why it's important, as Transmission Master Plan, that we continue growing. We cannot stop growing as a company and as a nation. One of the things to increase our tax revenues by ensuring that we have reliable power. And they keep on saying this, I think, from their studies, from various companies, that every percent point increase in the frequency of electricity outages results in our farms, the output declines by 3.3%, and with the revenue reduced by 2.7 every time the frequency of outages is increasing by a percentage point. So that's a quote I thought is very important as we work as a company, as a country, as a sector, to ensure that we have reliable power reaching out to the current industries that we have.